A billionaire risked everything to test the one thing money can't buy: love. After a near-fatal accident, he made a shocking decision. He pretended to be in a coma. What he heard while lying there changed his life forever. His wife started planning his death. His family fought over his wealth. But the one person who showed up for him was the maid no one ever noticed. And when he finally opened his eyes, he didn't just wake up. He made a decision that destroyed his old life completely. Hello, fam. Welcome to True Love Stories, where we share interesting and intriguing stories. Please do well to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Do not forget to like and share with your loved ones. Now let's dive into the story. Darius Cole didn't just become wealthy. He engineered his way into power. Born and raised on the south side of Atlanta, he grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint, inconsistent heat, and a mother who stretched every dollar like it owed her something. Back then, survival required precision. Excellence wasn't optional. It was his only way out. By 38, he was a billionaire. His company, Cole Grid Logistics, wasn't flashy, but it was essential. It powered supply chains, optimized distribution routes, and quietly became the backbone behind major retailers and tech giants. While others chased headlines, Darius built infrastructure. Quiet money. Real money. At 42, he had everything people thought mattered. A glass-wrapped penthouse overlooking the Atlanta skyline. A car collection that rarely saw the road. Private investments stacked in industries most people didn't even understand. His name carried weight in rooms he once could never enter. But his real investment? His family. And that was where the losses lived. Annabelle Cole, his wife of 6 years, embodied luxury like it was a second skin. She was beautiful, effortlessly so, but it was curated beauty. Her long jet-black bundles flowed down her back in perfect layers, always styled, always camera-ready. Her closet looked like a high-end showroom, filled with designer pieces that rotated faster than seasons. She had once been different. Back when they met, she wore her natural hair in soft curls and talked about opening a boutique. She laughed more, needed less. Now she measured life in upgrades. "Darius," she said one evening, barely looking up from her tablet, "I think we should redo the kitchen again. The marble we chose last year already feels outdated." Darius stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the city he conquered. "It's been a year, Annabelle." "Exactly," she replied casually. "You know how fast things change." He turned, studying her. Not her face, but her distance. When was the last time something didn't need upgrading? She finally looked at him, confused. What does that even mean? He didn't answer, because he wasn't sure she'd understand. His younger brother Marcus lived like he was allergic to responsibility. Fresh cuts every week, luxury streetwear, always smelling like expensive cologne and bad decisions. He bounced from one business venture to another, crypto one month, nightlife promotions the next, funded entirely by Darius. "Big bro, I'm telling you, this one is different," Marcus said, lounging across Darius's office couch, scrolling through his phone. "All I need is a little startup push. Nothing crazy." "How much?" Darius asked without looking up from his laptop. Marcus grinned. 50. Darius paused. 50,000? Marcus laughed. "Nah, man. 50 bands. You know I don't think small." Darius leaned back slowly. "You've said that before. And I meant it every time." "That's the problem," Darius replied quietly. Marcus didn't hear the weight in that sentence. Or maybe he just didn't care. Then there were his parents. They lived in a gated community now, 5 bedrooms, manicured lawn, the kind of place they used to drive past just to imagine. Darius made that real for them. But gratitude has a short lifespan when comfort becomes normal. His mother, Lorraine, had developed a taste for status. Church circles, social clubs, charity boards. She moved through them like a woman who had always belonged there. "Darius, I told Mrs. Henderson you might sponsor the new community center wing," she said over dinner one Sunday. "I might," he repeated. "Well, you should. It reflects well on the family." His father, Charles, was quieter but no less demanding. A retired man who now spent his time analyzing markets he barely understood. "I've been looking into this investment group," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "If you put in a few million, we could see strong returns." Darius flipped through it briefly. "This isn't stable." Charles frowned. "You always say that. Sometimes you have to take risks." Darius looked up slowly. "I already did. That's why we're sitting here." The room went still. But not for long. Because discomfort didn't live long in that house. It was always replaced by expectation. The pattern was consistent. Calls that started with "How are you?" but quickly turned into "I was thinking." Visits that revolved around what could be gained, not what could be shared. Even birthdays felt transactional. Gifts exchanged not out of thoughtfulness, but out of obligation and price tags. And when Darius needed something, silence. One night, he came home earlier than usual. No assistants. No drivers. Just him. The penthouse was quiet, dimly lit, untouched. Annabelle wasn't home. He loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, and sat alone in a space designed for admiration, but not comfort. He picked up his phone. Scrolled. Contacts filled with people who needed him. Very few who knew him. He stopped on Annabelle's name. Then Marcus. Then Mom. Then Dad. He could call any of them. But for what? To interrupt their lives with his feelings? To ask for something he already knew they didn't know how to give? He set the phone down. The city buzzed outside, alive, loud, endless. Inside, it was just him. A billionaire surrounded by everything. Except sincerity. Earlier that week, during a rare moment of honesty, he had tried to open up. They were all together, dinner at his parents' house. Laughter, music, expensive food laid out across the table. "I've been tired," Darius said, setting his fork down. "Not physically. Just tired." Annabelle barely glanced up. "You always say that when work gets busy. It's not just work." His mother waved a hand lightly. "You need a vacation. Go somewhere nice. Reset." Marcus chuckled. "Yeah, take me with you this time." Darius looked around the table. "I'm serious." "So are we," his father replied. "You've built too much to start sounding unsure now." That was the end of it. Not because the conversation was resolved, but because it was dismissed. Later that night, Darius stood in front of his bathroom mirror. Perfect reflection. Tailored life. Controlled image. Empty center. He leaned on the counter, staring at himself longer than usual. "They don't love you," he said quietly. "Not with bitterness. Just truth. They love what you do for them." And for the first time, he didn't argue with that thought. Downstairs, in the quiet rhythm of the house, life continued unnoticed. One of the staff members moved through the kitchen, finishing up for the night. Her name was Jasmine. She wore her hair in neat, shoulder-length box braids, pulled back into a low ponytail. Simple. Practical. Real. She paused for a moment, glancing toward the staircase. "Mr. Cole works too hard," she murmured to herself, then went back to cleaning, unaware that, in a house full of people, she was one of the only ones who actually saw him. The rain started before sunset. Not a gentle drizzle, but the kind that swallowed the city whole. Thick sheets of water crashing against glass, flooding streets, turning headlights into blurred streaks of gold and red. Atlanta moved slower when it rained like this, but it never stopped. Neither did Darius. He had dismissed his driver earlier that evening. "I'll take the car myself," he said, grabbing his keys before anyone could question him. It wasn't about convenience. It was about control. Driving was one of the few moments where no one could ask him for anything. No calls he had to take. No expectations pressing in from every direction. Just the road, the hum of the engine, and his own thoughts, unfiltered and unavoidable. And tonight, those thoughts were loud. The windshield wipers moved in a steady rhythm, back and forth, but they couldn't keep up with the storm. Darius's hands rested firmly on the steering wheel of his matte black sedan. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, stretching endlessly ahead of him. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Annabelle. He let it ring. Then another notification. Marcus. He didn't check. Another. Mom. Darius exhaled slowly. eyes still fixed on the road. "They always know how to find me," he muttered under his breath. Just never when it mattered. His mind drifted, back through conversations, moments, patterns he could no longer ignore. Annabelle's voice. "We should upgrade." Marcus's laugh. "Just one more investment." His mother. "It reflects well on the family." His father. "You have to take risks." All of them echoing. None of them asking. None of them seeing him. The storm outside matched the one building inside his chest. The light ahead turned green. Darius pressed the accelerator gently, easing into the intersection. And then, headlights. Too fast. Too close. A truck barreled through the red light from the left, tires skidding against the slick road, horn blaring too late. Darius's eyes widened. Impact. Metal collided with a deafening crunch. Glass exploded inward. The world spun, violent, disorienting, unreal. His body jerked with the force, seatbelt locking tight against his chest. Then, silence. Not complete silence, but the kind that feels like it. Distant ringing. A dull, heavy pressure behind his eyes. The smell of smoke and rain mixing in the air. Everything blurred. Shapes moved around him, shadows, voices, flashing lights. "Sir, stay with me. Get the door." Pulse is weak. Hands reached in. Cold air hit his face. The sound of sirens grew louder, then closer, then overwhelming. Darius tried to speak. Nothing came out. Tried to move. Nothing responded. And in that strange, suspended moment between consciousness and darkness, one thought slipped through. "I wonder who will show up." When he woke up, the world was white. Bright ceiling lights. Sterile walls. The steady beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor anchoring him to reality. His body felt heavy, like it didn't fully belong to him yet. A figure stood nearby, a doctor flipping through a chart. "You're awake," the doctor said, stepping closer. "Mr. Cole, can you hear me?" Darius blinked slowly. His throat was dry. "Yeah, you were in a serious accident. You're lucky. A few fractures, some internal bruising, but nothing life-threatening." Lucky. That word didn't land the way it should have. Darius swallowed, wincing slightly. "My family?" The doctor glanced briefly at the nurse, then back at him. "We've contacted them. They should be on their way." Darius gave a small nod. Okay. Time passed differently in that room. Slower. He watched the clock on the wall. Listened to the machines. Felt every second stretch. 30 minutes. No one. 45. Still no one. An hour. Nothing. No rushed footsteps in the hallway. No familiar voices. No one pushing through the door in panic or relief. Just the quiet hum of hospital equipment and the distant echo of other people being cared for. Darius stared at the ceiling, expression unreadable. And something inside him settled. Not disappointment. Not even anger. Just confirmation. When the doctor returned, Darius turned his head slightly. "How bad did it look?" he asked. "The crash," the doctor replied. "Bad enough that it could have gone very differently." Darius was quiet for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. "What would it take to make it look worse?" The doctor frowned. "I'm sorry." Darius shifted slightly, ignoring the discomfort. "What would it take to make it seem like I didn't wake up?" Silence filled the room. "That's not something we just—" "I'm not asking you to hurt me," Darius interrupted calmly. "I'm asking you to help me observe." The doctor studied him carefully. "Observe what?" Darius's gaze moved back to the empty doorway. Who actually shows up when there's nothing left to gain? The idea sounded extreme. Because it was. But to Darius, it felt necessary. He had spent years funding a version of love that might not even exist. This was the only way to see it clearly. No influence. No power. No voice. Just absence. After a long discussion, legal concerns, ethical lines, medical supervision, the doctor agreed under strict conditions. Darius would be placed in a controlled, medically supervised state. Not an actual coma, but close enough in appearance to be convincing. Only a select few hospital staff would know the truth. "He'll be unresponsive," the doctor later explained to the team. Vitals stable, but no signs of consciousness. And just like that, Darius Cole disappeared. Machines surrounded him once more. Lights dimmed. His body stilled. Eyes closed. To the outside world, he was gone. Hours later, footsteps finally approached his room. Voices. Familiar ones. They said ICU. Annabelle's voice echoed faintly. About time, Marcus added. The door opened, and as they stepped inside, Darius, silent and unseen behind closed eyes, prepared to finally meet the truth. The room was cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. Darius lay motionless in the hospital bed, machines breathing rhythm into the silence. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only proof that life still existed beneath the stillness. And then, the door opened. He's in here, Annabelle's voice said, low but composed. Her heels clicked softly against the tile as she stepped inside, followed by Marcus and then his parents. The energy they brought wasn't frantic. It wasn't desperate. It was measured. Darius could feel it immediately. Annabelle was the first to approach the bed. She looked flawless. Her honey-blonde wig was styled in soft body waves, cascading over her shoulders like she had somewhere important to be after this. Her makeup was untouched, perfectly blended, lips glossed, lashes full. She stared down at him. No gasp. No breakdown. Just observation. Wow, she murmured. He looks really bad. Marcus stepped beside her, hands in his pockets, peering down like he was inspecting damage on a car. Yeah, he said. That's rough. Their mother, Lorraine, pressed her lips together, shaking her head slowly. Lord have mercy. But even that sounded rehearsed, like something she knew she was supposed to say. Charles stood at the foot of the bed, silent, studying the machines more than his son. No one touched him. Not at first. No one grabbed his hand. No one leaned in close. They just stood there, looking, assessing, waiting. So what did the doctor say exactly? Annabelle asked, crossing her arms. Lorraine sighed. They said he's unresponsive. Could be days to weeks or longer. Marcus let out a low whistle. So he's just out. That's what it sounds like. Annabelle shifted her weight, glancing briefly at the monitors. And they don't know if he's going to wake up? No. A pause. Then, did he update his will? The question hung in the air like something heavy and final. Darius heard it, felt it. Every word landed with surgical precision. Lorraine glanced at Annabelle, lowering her voice slightly. I'm not sure, but you know how he is, he plans everything. Annabelle nodded slowly. I would hope so. Marcus leaned against the wall, already pulling his phone out. Man, I mean, not to sound crazy, but we should probably figure that out sooner rather than later. Darius's chest rose and fell steadily, controlled by the illusion. Inside, something cracked. Over the next hour, the tone didn't improve. If anything, it sharpened. Well, the house is in both our names, Annabelle said, pacing slightly now. But his business, that's different. You'd still get a large portion, Charles added, finally speaking. Assuming everything is structured the way it should be. Marcus looked up from his phone. What about me? Lorraine shot him a look. This isn't the time. I'm just asking, Marcus shrugged. I'm his brother. And he's still alive, she snapped. Marcus held up his hands. For now. That sentence echoed louder than anything else. For now. Darius lay there, hearing his existence reduced to a timeline. Not a life. Not a person. A waiting period. Annabelle moved closer to the bed again, tilting her head slightly as she looked at him. You think he can hear us? She asked. The doctor, standing near the door, shook his head. There's no indication of that. She nodded. Good. Darius felt that word more than he heard it. The conversations became less filtered after that. More open. More honest. More revealing. They talked about assets. Properties. Control. Access. Who would take over what? What needed to be handled. At one point, Annabelle even sat in the chair beside his bed, not to comfort him, but to take a call. Yes, I might need to reschedule, she said into her phone, crossing her legs. My husband's in the ICU. Yeah, It's serious. A pause. Then a small laugh. I know, right? It's a lot. Darius lay inches away, listening to his life being reduced to inconvenience. By the second day, patterns formed. They visited, but not for long. An hour. Sometimes less. Always together, rarely alone. And always, the conversations circled back to the same thing. What happens if he doesn't wake up? Not how do we help him? Not what does he need? Just, what do we get? On the third day, the tension shifted. Disagreements started surfacing. I think everything should be divided evenly, Lorraine insisted. Evenly? Annabelle repeated, eyebrows raised. I'm his wife. And we're his family. I am his family. Marcus groaned. Here we go. You wouldn't even be in this position without him, Annabelle snapped. And neither would you, Lorraine fired back. Charles stepped in. This isn't productive. No, what's not productive, Annabelle said sharply, is pretending like I'm not the one who built a life with him. Darius wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so far from the truth. As their voices rose and fell, one thing became undeniable. They weren't grieving. They were negotiating. And Darius, silent, still, invisible in his own life, finally understood something he had been avoiding for years. This wasn't a moment of weakness for them. This wasn't stress talking. This was who they were, when they thought he was no longer watching. That night, after they left, the room fell quiet again. The machines continued their steady rhythm. The lights dimmed, and for the first time since the accident, Darius didn't feel confused. He didn't feel conflicted. He didn't even feel surprised. Just certain. They never loved me, he thought. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just clarity. Outside the room, footsteps passed. Nurses moved. Life continued. And somewhere down the hall, unnoticed, unannounced, someone else was about to enter his story. Not with demands. Not with expectations. But with something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Something real. By the fourth night, the hospital had settled into a rhythm. Daytime was noise, doctors, distant conversations, rolling carts, controlled urgency. But nighttime? Nighttime told the truth. The halls grew quiet. Lights dimmed. Even the machines seemed softer, like they were whispering instead of speaking. It was in those hours, when no one was performing, that reality showed itself clearly. And every night, like clockwork, Darius's family disappeared. They never stayed late. Never asked to. By 8 p.m., they were gone, back to their lives, their comfort, their routines, leaving him behind. That night, rain tapped lightly against the window again, softer than before. The storm had passed, but the air still carried its memory. Darius lay still, eyes closed, breathing steady. Alone. Or at least, that's what he thought. The door creaked open gently. Not the confident push of someone who belonged there, but a careful, almost hesitant movement. Like someone stepping into a space they weren't sure they had permission to enter. Soft footsteps followed. Then a pause. Mr. Cole? The voice was quiet. Familiar. Darius recognized it immediately. Jasmine. She stepped further into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She wasn't dressed like she was at work. No uniform, no structured presentation. Just a simple outfit, dark jeans, a fitted long-sleeve top, and a light jacket. Her hair was different too. Instead of the neat braids she wore during work hours, tonight her natural curls were out, full, soft, and pulled into a high puff that framed her face effortlessly. She looked like herself. Not staff. Not background. A person. In her hands, she held a small bundle of fresh flowers. Nothing extravagant. Just something simple and thoughtful, wrapped in brown paper. She approached the bed slowly, eyes fixed on him. They said you might not make it, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't believe that. She set the flowers gently on the table beside him, adjusting them like it mattered. Like he would notice. Jasmine hesitated before sitting down. Like she was debating whether she was crossing a line. Then finally, she pulled the chair closer and sat. For a moment, she just looked at him. Not analyzing. Not calculating. Just looking. I know you probably can't hear me, she said softly. But I still wanted to come. Darius felt something shift. Not in his body, but in his chest. Something unfamiliar. Something warm. You were always kind to me, Jasmine continued, her hands resting in her lap. Most people don't notice workers like us. We're just there. She gave a small, almost shy smile. But you did. Her eyes moved across his face, studying the stillness. You'd say good morning. Ask how my day was. Even when you were busy. She let out a quiet breath. That meant something. No one had ever said that to him before. Not about the small things. Not about the human things. I used to think, she went on, that people like you didn't have problems. That money fixed everything. A soft, thoughtful pause. But I don't think that's true anymore. She leaned back slightly, her gaze softening. You always looked tired, Mr. Cole. Not like you needed sleep, but like you were carrying too much. Darius's fingers twitched slightly under the sheet. The only reaction he allowed himself. Jasmine noticed nothing. She kept talking. Not because she expected a response, but because she cared enough to speak anyway. My grandma used to say, she continued, her voice gentle, that some people are strong for everyone else, but don't have anyone strong for them. She glanced down briefly, then back at him. I think you're one of those people. Silence settled between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full. After a moment, Jasmine leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice even more. I don't know what your family is saying, she admitted. I don't know what's going on outside this room. A small pause. But I do know this. She reached out, hesitated, then gently placed her hand over his. You're not alone. The contact was light, careful, but it carried more sincerity than anything he had felt in years. Darius felt it, every bit of it, and for the first time since this began. He wanted to open his eyes. He didn't, but the urge was there. I'm going to come back, Jasmine said softly, pulling her hand away after a moment. Even if it's just to sit here. She smiled faintly. And talk your ear off, I guess. She stood, adjusting her jacket, then paused at the door. Wake up, Mr. Cole, she said gently. Not for them, but for you. A beat. You deserve better than what you've been getting. Then she left. Quietly, just like she came. The room returned to silence. Machines humming. Rain tapping. Stillness. But something had changed. Completely. The next night she came back. This time with music, soft R&B playing low from her phone. The night after that, she brought a book and read out loud for a while, occasionally stopping to comment on parts she liked. Sometimes she talked about her day. Sometimes about her dreams. Sometimes about nothing at all. And sometimes, she just sat there, keeping him company in a way no one else had. Darius started to measure time differently. Not by his family's visits, but by hers. He learned things about her. That she was taking night classes, trying to finish her degree. That she sent money back home to help her younger siblings. That she loved old-school music and Sunday mornings. That she laughed easily, but carried responsibility quietly. She never once asked him for anything. Not money. Not favors. Not opportunities. Just presence. And in that quiet hospital room, with no audience, no expectations, no transactions, Darius Cole experienced something completely unfamiliar. Care, without conditions. By the end of the week, one truth had become undeniable. The people he had given everything to had given him nothing real in return, and the one person who owed him nothing at all was the only one showing up like he mattered. Lying there, eyes closed, body still, Darius made a decision. Not impulsive, not emotional, but clear. When he opened his eyes again, nothing in his life would stay the same. And the first person he would truly see was the one who had already seen him all along. Time had stretched long enough. What started as an experiment had become a revelation, and then a burden. Because once you see people clearly, you can't unsee them. Weeks passed inside that hospital room. To the outside world, Darius Cole remained in a coma, unmoving, unresponsive, uncertain. But inside, he was more awake than he had ever been. His family had settled into a pattern that no longer even tried to hide itself. They still visited, but now it felt procedural, predictable, empty. Annabelle stopped pretending to be emotional altogether. She came dressed like she had somewhere better to be, which most days she did. Her hairstyles rotated between sleek ponytails and designer-installed waves, always immaculate, always intentional, but never once disheveled by concern. She spent more time on her phone than looking at him. "Yeah, I might have to postpone the trip," she said one afternoon, standing near the window. "No, not cancel, just delay it a bit. Yeah, it's complicated right now." A pause, then a soft laugh. "I know, right? Timing is crazy." Darius lay there, listening, not reacting, just recording. Marcus had grown even bolder. He no longer lowered his voice when discussing money. "I'm telling you," he said one day, pacing the room, "we need access to his accounts sooner rather than later. Sitting around waiting doesn't make sense." "You're not thinking clearly," Lorraine replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "No, you're not thinking fast enough," Marcus shot back. "This is real life." Charles stayed quieter, but even his silence had shifted. It wasn't grief. It was calculation. They weren't waiting for Darius to wake up. They were waiting for confirmation that he wouldn't. And then, there was Jasmine. She never missed a night. Not once. Even when she was tired. Even when her voice sounded heavier than usual. Even when she had nothing to say. She still showed up. That morning felt different. Darius sensed it before anything happened. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was the weight of everything he had heard, everything he now understood. Or maybe it was time. Jasmine sat beside him, as she always did. Her hair was styled in medium-length twists today, pulled back loosely, a few strands framing her face. She looked comfortable, real, unfiltered. She held his hand gently, absent-mindedly tracing small circles against his skin as she spoke. "You know," she said softly, "I had a long day today." A small sigh escaped her lips. "My professor thinks I'm behind, which, okay, I am, but still." She smiled faintly. "I'm trying." Darius focused on her voice, grounded himself in it. "I almost didn't come tonight," she admitted quietly. "I was tired, and I figured, what difference does it make, right?" A pause. Her grip on his hand tightened slightly. "But then I thought." She looked at him. "What if it does make a difference?" Something inside him shifted. That was the moment. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just certain. "You're not alone," Jasmine continued softly. "Even if it feels like it." Darius opened his eyes. Jasmine froze. Her breath caught instantly, her entire body going still as she stared at him. For a second, she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. "Mr. Cole," she whispered, her voice trembling. Darius turned his head slightly toward her. Weak but aware. Present. "I heard you," he said quietly. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes filling instantly with tears. "Oh my God!" She stood abruptly, then hesitated like she didn't know whether to call someone or stay right where she was. "You're awake. You're actually awake." "I've been awake," he said. That stopped her. Completely. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. Darius exhaled slowly, the weight of truth settling between them. "I needed to see something," he said. "And I did." Within minutes, the room filled. Doctors rushed in. Nurses followed. Monitors were checked, questions asked, movements observed. "Mr. Cole, can you tell me what day it is?" He answered calmly. "Do you know where you are?" "Yes." "Can you move your fingers?" He did. Everything checked out. Everything except the situation. Then came the call. "They need to know," a nurse said quietly. And just like that, the people who had already started dividing his life were summoned back into it. When they arrived, they expected relief. Tears. Gratitude. A miracle. What they walked into instead was judgment. Darius was sitting upright in the bed. No machines breathing for him. No illusion of absence. Just him. Watching. Annabelle gasped first. "Darius, oh my God." She rushed forward, her voice suddenly filled with emotion that hadn't existed days before. You're awake. I knew you'd pull through. Stop. One word. Calm. Controlled. Final. She froze. The room went silent. Marcus blinked. Bro, you good? Darius's eyes moved across each of them slowly. Measuring. Confirming. Ending. I heard everything, he said. No one spoke. Because they understood immediately. Annabelle tried to recover first. Her voice softened, carefully constructed. Baby, you don't understand, we were just planning, Darius finished. She stopped. His mother stepped forward slightly. Darius, we were worried. No, he said, his tone still even. You were preparing. Marcus let out a dry laugh. Man, come on, it wasn't like that. Darius looked directly at him. It was exactly like that. Silence pressed in from all sides. Heavy. Unavoidable. I built everything you have, Darius continued. Every comfort. Every opportunity. Every safety net you've ever relied on. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And the moment I couldn't give anymore. A pause. You showed me exactly who you are. No one denied it. Because they couldn't. Annabelle's expression shifted. Less performance, more calculation. So what are you saying? She asked carefully. Darius didn't hesitate. I'm saying everything changes now. And for the first time since they walked into that room, they realized something they had never considered before. They weren't in control anymore. Darius leaned back slightly, his gaze steady, his voice calm but immovable. I'm done being useful to people who don't actually care if I exist. His eyes shifted briefly. Toward Jasmine, standing quietly in the corner. Not speaking. Not inserting herself. Just there. And in that moment, the contrast became undeniable. One side had history. The other had truth. Darius had already decided which one mattered more. And this time, there would be no negotiation. Darius Cole didn't make loud decisions. He made final ones. The shift began quietly, almost invisibly to the outside world. No press releases. No dramatic announcements. Just actions. Precise. Irreversible. Clean. The first thing he did after leaving the hospital wasn't going home. Because that penthouse, the one filled with designer furniture, curated art, and carefully constructed luxury, was no longer a home. It was a stage, and he was done performing. Within a week, Annabelle was served. The divorce papers arrived mid-morning, delivered with the same efficiency Darius used in business. No warning. No discussion. Just terms. Clear. Calculated. Controlled. You can't be serious, Annabelle said, storming into the office of his legal team, her sleek jet-black bob cut sharp against her tense expression. After everything I've stood by you through? The attorney didn't react. Mrs. Cole, the terms are outlined in full. Mr. Cole has been more than fair. Fair, she scoffed. I'm his wife. And you will be compensated as such, the attorney replied calmly. But not as an owner of his empire. Annabelle's lifestyle would remain comfortable. But the access? The influence? The unlimited flow? Gone. Marcus was next. Darius didn't argue with him. Didn't lecture him. Didn't even raise his voice. He simply cut him off. No more transfers, Darius said during their final conversation. Marcus blinked. Wait, what? No more funding. No more bailouts. No more, just this one time. Bro, you serious right now? Marcus laughed, but there was panic under it. You acting different. I am different. Because of that hospital situation? Come on, man. This isn't about the hospital, Darius said evenly. That just made things clear. Marcus shook his head. So you just done with me? Darius held his gaze. I'm done being used by you. Their parents were handled with the same clarity. Darius ensured they would never struggle. Their house remained theirs. A structured financial plan guaranteed stability. But the excess? The influence over his decisions? The expectation of access? Removed. You're punishing us, Lorraine said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. No, Darius replied calmly. I'm correcting what I allowed. And just like that, the family that had revolved around him lost their orbit. Months passed, and for the first time in his life, Darius experienced something unfamiliar. Silence that didn't feel empty. He relocated just outside the city. Not to isolate, but to reset. The new home wasn't about status. It was about intention. Clean architecture. Open space. Natural light pouring through large windows. A place that felt lived in, not displayed. There were no unnecessary rooms. No performative luxury. Just peace. And Jasmine. At first, their connection stayed exactly where it began. Honest. Uncomplicated. Real. She didn't move in immediately. Didn't expect to. Didn't ask for anything. Even after everything changed, Jasmine remained grounded in who she was. She still worked. Still went to class. Still showed up for her life the same way she had before Darius ever saw her differently. One evening, they sat outside on the back patio. The city lights were visible in the distance, but far enough away to feel separate from them. Jasmine's hair was styled in a soft curly fro tonight, slightly shaped, catching the warm glow of the outdoor lights. She wore something simple, comfortable, but carried herself with a quiet confidence that didn't need attention. "You know," she said, glancing at him, "most people would have changed everything about their life after something like that." Darius leaned back in his chair slightly. "I did." She smiled faintly. "No, I mean everything." A pause. New people. New circles. New image. Darius shook his head. "I don't need new everything," he said. "I just needed what was real." Jasmine studied him for a moment. "You sure you know what that looks like?" Darius met her gaze. "I do now." What grew between them wasn't rushed. It wasn't built on gratitude. And it definitely wasn't built on power. It was built on consistency. Conversations that lasted hours. Silences that felt comfortable. Moments that didn't need to be impressive to matter. Jasmine challenged him. Not his money. Not his success. But his perspective. "You don't always have to carry everything alone," she told him one night. "I'm used to it. That doesn't mean it's healthy." No one had ever said that to him so directly. And meant it without judgment. Over time, he let her in. Not into his world, but into himself. A year later, they were married. The ceremony was private. No media. No industry figures. No extended guest list filled with obligation. Just a small group of people who actually mattered. People who showed up. Not for what Darius had, but for who he had become. Jasmine wore her hair in an elegant braided updo. Intricate but natural, highlighting her features without overshadowing them. She looked like herself, elevated, not transformed. And that's exactly how Darius saw her. Not as someone who needed to fit into his life, but as someone who made it better. Time moved forward. Steady. Intentional. Then came the moment that redefined everything. Darius stood in a softly lit hospital room once again. But this time, there was no fear. No uncertainty. No test. Just life. Jasmine lay in the bed, tired but glowing, holding their newborn son. Darius stepped closer slowly, something unspoken in his expression. She looked up at him, smiling softly. "You want to hold him?" He nodded. Carefully, he took his son into his arms. Small. Warm. Real. Darius stared down at him, something shifting deep in his chest. Not pressure. Not responsibility, but purpose. "This," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with something deeper than emotion, "is what family is supposed to feel like. No conditions. No transactions. No expectations tied to performance. Just love." He looked over at Jasmine, and for the first time in his life, everything he had built, everything he had lost, everything he had learned, finally made sense. His empire still thrived. His name still carried power. His success still stood untouched. But none of that defined him anymore. Because now, when he went home, he wasn't walking into a life that needed him. He was walking into one that chose him. Finally, we have come to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, Do well to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.